everyone. Thank you so much for loving our country so much that you are here this evening. Your presence says to the rest of the nation that Barack Obama will be a one-term president. Thank you so much for your presence. He will be the one-term president. I know that because I've been on the front lines for the last 5 years in Washington, D.C. I came into office the same day that Nancy Pelosi raised her right arm and got the gavel in her hand as the Speaker of the House. I have watched the destruction that has come upon our nation with the out-of-control spending, with the tax increases, with the effort to put into place the takeover of 1/6 of the American economy with the passage of Obamacare. And it was my honor to be called President Obama's chief critic when it came to opposing him on the issue of Obamacare. This is something that we know in 2012, as was stated earlier by some of our speakers. We must, in 2012, have a very different kind of a president. Every day I'm on a plane somewhere all across the United States of America, and I can tell you, from what I see everywhere across the country, people have made up their mind. They have decided that Barack Obama won't have a second term. Now the question will be, who will we replace Barack Obama with? Will it be a candidate who has a proven record of standing for us and for what we believe in? This is the year when social conservatives can have it all. Because from my experience, a social conservative is a fiscal conservative. A social conservative is a national security conservative. We can have it all this year. Growing up in Iowa, I was born here, I was raised here. I tell people everything I needed to know I learned in the state of Iowa. I thank God for the background and the faith that my parents gave to me. My parents from a very early age made sure that our family made it to church on the weekend and that we prayed at night and that we prayed before our meals. But it was when I became 16 years of age that I was confronted with a question in my own life. What would I do with Jesus Christ? What would his place be in my own life? And I made a decision on November 1st of 1972 when I bowed my knee and received Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and my life was changed forever. And at that moment, I radically abandoned my life and myself to him and said, whatever I am and whoever I am and whatever I will be, it is yours, and it's for you to show me the way on that decision. And I thank God for what the Lord has given to me and what he's done for me and for this nation and for all of us here. And over the course of time and growing with him, I married a man who also gave his life to Jesus Christ. We established our home on Jesus Christ. And after 33 years of marriage and after 5 biological children, we've been privileged to raise 23 foster children into our home. We have seen the goodness of God and the grace of God on our nation. And the values that I have learned, I have taken with me, and I have stood on those values in Washington, D.C. as a member of Congress. I have stood up as a firm, strong ally to our friend Israel. And as President of the United States, I will stand with Israel. As a member of the United States House of Representatives Committee on Intelligence, we're a very small committee that deals with the nation's classified secrets. I can tell you quite clearly that it was a tremendous mistake for Barack Obama to put daylight between the United States and our ally Israel. We have been seeing the fruits of that decision. And when he called upon Israel to retreat to her indefensible 1967 borders in May of this year, that sent a signal. And that sent a signal to nations all around the world that it was time and open season for them to increase their hostilities. Because this is the first president Since Israel declared her sovereignty, 11 minutes after she declared her sovereignty, Harry Truman recognized Israel. Every president since then has stood by Israel until Barack Obama. He has sent those signals of weakness, and today we have seen unspeakable actions, including recently where literally, in my mind, it was an act of war, when Iran chose to commit an international assassination in our nation's capital. This is something that cannot be abided by, and something that the United States has to send a signal. That's why, as President of the United States, I will stand by Israel, and I will stand with our allies, and I will stand against our enemies, which would be an Iran with a nuclear weapon. In this last week, what have we seen? Besides the incident of international assassination, we saw President Obama put the United States into a fourth war with no identifiable vital American national interest. There is no important task for a president than to be commander-in-chief. I see that from the perspective of the Intelligence Committee. I would never consider negotiating and releasing the hostages in Guantanamo Bay in a hostage release. That is something we cannot do. We have the mastermind of the 9/11 disaster and tragedy, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who is in Guantanamo Bay. We would never consider negotiating those terrorists, admitted terrorists, for an American in a hostage situation. I also want you to know quite firmly, I stand for life from conception until natural death. And a president must know and recognize what Barack Obama does not. He says that he personally does not believe in abortion. But President Obama also believes that the government should not intervene when it comes to the issue of abortion. I believe that the government must intervene, and I stand for a federal constitutional amendment to protect life from conception until natural death. I also believe, sitting on the Intelligence Committee, we know now that there are 59,000 other than Mexicans who come across America's borders every year. This is a national security threat. I'm the first candidate to sign a pledge to build a fence on our southern border. And I will tell you, as President of the United States, I will not only build that fence in the first year of my presidency, I will make sure that we have the boots on the ground with the border security guards to deal with this issue. We will cut out taxpayer-subsidized benefits for illegal aliens and for their children. We will not stand for subsidies for illegal aliens or their children when it comes to higher education. And I also believe that it's time to put forward legislation to deal with the issue of anchor babies in the United States of America. And English needs to be the official language of the United States government. This is our year when we don't compromise. This is our year when we don't settle. We need to look at the records of the candidates. We need to look at what we've done and what we've fought for. For the last 5 years, I have been at the tip of the spear on issue after issue, whether it's been standing up for our friend Israel, whether it's been standing against out-of-control spending, whether it's been standing against Barney Frank on the Financial Services Committee. I have done that against the Job and Housing Destruction Act, also known as Dodd-Frank. It was said earlier that our president needs to come in after being sworn in and sign the repeal bill for Obamacare. I wrote that bill to repeal Obamacare because I fought against Obamacare. I wrote the bill to repeal Dodd-Frank because I understand what needs to be done to repeal those bills. I am a fighter. As I said, I grew up in Iowa with 3 brothers and no sisters. That's the best preparation for politics any girl could ever have. I have been We do these things not because these things are easy. We do these things because they're hard and because they must be done. I firmly believe that 2012 is it. I believe this is it. This is America's last chance to get it right, because we know from the International Monetary Fund, this is the last election when the United States will be the premier economic superpower of the world. And we know that, according to their figures, China will be that economic superpower before the 2016 election. And so you see, we only have one chance. And we need to have a candidate that we can count on, someone who will cut back on the spending, and we have to cut it by 43%. We need someone who gets tough love. I get tough love. I've raised 28 children. I'm the old woman in the shoe. You're looking at tough love. I've taken tough love, not only to Nancy Pelosi, but I've also stood up against the Republican leadership in Washington, D.C. I know how to fight, but I also know how to get things done. And what we need in the next president is someone who understands what this president does not. That our nation will rise and our nation will fall in the way that we uphold the values that America has stood for. And it was George Washington and our founders who told us in the Northwest Ordinance that we stand on religion and morality and virtue. And our nation, since the early 1960s and Supreme Court decisions, has knocked this off one by one. Religion, throwing the Bible and prayer out of the public school classroom, and now out of the marketplace of ideas. Throwing morality out of mainstream public life and mocking virtue. Our nation was formed on religion and morality and virtue. We believe in religious liberty. And once again, as a nation, we must stand, and we must stand tall. It looks very difficult right now, but one of my favorite heroes in the Old Testament is someone that you don't hear of very often. His name is Jonathan. And Jonathan's father was Saul. And King Saul was looking at a battle with the Philistines, and King Saul led the Israelite army. And King Saul was so defeated, because as he looked up at the top of the cliff, there were the Philistines. And as they stood there, they had weapons. They had overpowering numbers in their army. King Saul didn't. He didn't have the weapons. He didn't have the army. He gave up and he was paralyzed. But not his son Jonathan. Jonathan turned to his armor-bearer, his fellow soldier, and he said, "The Lord will hear us if we climb the cliffs, and if the Philistines say to us, 'Come up,' then we will know that the Lord is on our side, and we can scale the cliffs, and we will see that victory." And the armor-bearer said to Jonathan some of the most faithful words recorded in Holy Scripture. He said, "I am with you, heart and soul." And together Jonathan and his armor-bearer scaled the cliffs, and the Philistines said to them, come up to where we are." And Jonathan and the armor-bearer, by faith, went to the top of the cliffs. And not only did Jonathan and the armor-bearer defeat the Philistines on the cliff, the Scripture goes on to say it was the entire Philistine army. Because you see, that day there was faith, and that day there was a miracle. And it will take a miracle to set America back on course and on our foundation. But I believe in miracles, and I believe in the one who sends miracles. It is not too late for the United States. And I know that together, we can take this nation back, and we can restore it to the foundations that the founders so brilliantly gave and fought and died and gave their last full measure of devotion to secure for us. And I thank you.
Congresswoman Bachmann, we're privileged to have you here tonight. And question number one is, what would you specifically do to prevent abortion on demand and defend traditional marriage?
Number one, on abortion on demand, I would be fully supportive of a federal constitutional amendment to define life from beginning at conception. I believe in life from conception until natural death. And I would support all pro-life language that comes across my desk. I've recently introduced the Informed Choices Heartbeat Act so that every woman prior to having an abortion would have to listen and see her unborn baby before making that all-important decision to choose life. It's also very important for everyone in this room to know we already have taxpayer-funded abortion. Obamacare, for the first time in history, gave us taxpayer-funded abortion. We will get one chance to repeal Obamacare, one chance, and that's 2012. Because $105,464,000,000 is already embedded in Obamacare, and it's in a series of post-dated checks that Barack Obama is cashing right now to implement taxpayer-funded abortion and Obamacare in all 50 states. We only have one chance to get rid of what will ultimately become socialized medicine. This is a pro-life issue to repeal Obamacare. I will not rest until I elect 13 like-minded U.S. Republican senators to join me in Washington so we can actually repeal that bill. And in answer to what will I do to defend marriage, I did. In my home state of Minnesota, when it was extremely unpopular, I introduced the bill to define marriage as one man and one woman. And we persisted. And even after I left Minnesota, I worked with my successors, and now Minnesota will be the first state to have on its ballot the definition of marriage as one man and one woman in this upcoming year. And as President of the United States, I would fully support the federal marriage amendment to define marriage as one man and one woman.
Thank you. Question number 2. What would you do to restore fiscal responsibility and promote creation of jobs in the United States?
I've introduced my plan, which is more than a tax plan, more than an energy plan. It is a comprehensive plan to turn the economy around and get it back on the right rails. We have to do, quite frankly, what I learned growing up in Iowa, and it's this. You can't spend more money than what you take in. This is a non-negotiable. We are spending 43% more than what we're taking in. And this is a morality issue. It's an economic issue, but it's a morality issue. Because you must consider, when Ronald Reagan was president in the early 1980s, America was the #1 creditor nation in the world. We had all the money, and we were loaning it to other nations. We are now the biggest debtor nation in the world. Just in the time that I've been in Congress, from January 2007, we were $8.67 trillion in debt. Do you know how indebted we are today? After the debt ceiling vote that I was fighting against, raising that debt ceiling, we are now have the capacity to be in debt $16.7 trillion. We have almost doubled our indebtedness in 4.5 years. That's why we have to have someone, as I've often said, with a titanium spine to say no and do the very difficult thing that needs to be done, and that is cutting back. I will shut down the Department of Education. I will shut down the EPA. I will shut down the Department of Energy. I will shut down the Department of Interior. I will shut down the Department of Commerce. We have got to decide once and for all, the federal government gets practically nothing right. Shut it down, send it back to the states. We can do this. We can do this. The country will be better for it, and it will lead to a pro-growth economy. That's my entire life. I'm a former federal tax litigation attorney. My husband and I run a profitable business. I personally believe that turning a profit is a very good thing. I stand for profit and believe in profit. And so the first thing that we have to do is what you would do in your home and what you would do in your business. If you're in financial trouble, you either freeze your credit card in the freezer or you cut it up. In the case of the United States, you take the credit card away. They have to cut back on spending. Then you cut taxes to some of the lowest in the industrialized world. I will abolish the United States federal tax code and have a flatter, simpler, fairer income tax. And then you abolish the mother of all regulatory bills, and it's 11 points in my plan. So go to MichelleBachmann.com.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Bachmann. What is your comprehensive plan to shape your future administration's energy policy? Please include how this vision differs from the approach of the current administration.
My plan on energy is 180 degrees different than the current administration's plan on energy, and I have been fighting this during my entire time in Congress. This is one of the best stories that the United States of America has to tell. Earlier this year, the Congressional Research Service issued a report that said that the United States of America is the #1 energy resource-rich nation in the world. God has given us such a tremendous gift. If we legalize American energy production, which I have been advocating throughout my time in Congress, we will create very quickly 1.4 million high-paying jobs, will increase domestic energy supplies 50%, and that will bring $800 billion into the United States Treasury. We have more oil in 3 western states in the form of shale oil than all of the oil in Saudi Arabia. We have 25% of all the coal in the world. We have some of the largest finds in natural gas found recently in Pennsylvania. We have trillions of cubic square feet of natural gas, including solar, including wind, including biofuels here in Iowa. We've got it all. And so I want to legalize it all, and I also want to change the EPA and get rid of the EPA. We have 50 EPAs at each state level, so I want to get rid of it so we can open up American energy production and be the leader in the world and be the head and not the tail.
If you could reverse one energy-related policy decision from the last 3 years, what would it be, and what would you have done differently?
There are so many, but I would say that the one that has really hurt the economy in a most devastating way was the moratorium that President Obama put on after the oil spill that occurred. There was devastation that occurred because of the oil flow that occurred, but there was nothing that was worse than the moratorium that he put on. The Gulf Coast region still continues to feel the effects from the moratoriums. Here's something else with energy. I had toured ANWR and had toured the ANWR region in 2008, which, by the way, is the most perfect place on the planet to drill for oil, and we should be drilling in ANWR. Every lease that gets purchased for drilling, before anything happens, there's a radical environmental group that files a lawsuit to drive up the price on those leases. We need to end that practice, and we need to set up special courts to deal with that, because we have seen our energy policy absolutely tied up in knots. Again, I've spent 4 years on this issue. I know what it needs to be done, and I have proposed an energy policy that will open up, unlock, unleash, and create high-paying jobs all across the United States of America. This is the first and easiest thing that the next President of the United States can do, and this will be the treasure trove that God has given to the United States to turn our economy around, and I can't wait to do it. Is that it? Is that it? Okay. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. I love you all. Thank you.